Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm Ayasoma, and I'm here with Bhante Sudaso. And we're here for monk chat. So hello to Maria, Sam, Sud, John, Kumu, Mary, all the friends who are checking in right now. Whenever you're ready, feel free to type in a question, and we'll try our best to answer them. And of course, also all the residents are welcome to ask any questions at this time. Hello also to Suze, she's from Brockway.
You had a question the other day.
Yeah. So I think the question was about the chanting, prayer chantings. So in order to cure any distractions, been practicing metta and understanding the Dhamma. There's also extra support with chanting periods to help with that. So I know that chanting the period chanting 108 or 180 times. There's different powers with that, and along with chanting the Om Sutra 7 times. So I wanted to know more about that.
Bhante, can you rephrase just for the live audience that might have not heard?
So our resident Thinnery is asking about the power of paritta chanting, in particular repeating particular parittas a certain number of times, such as chanting the Itipiso Gata 108 times, you said?
Yeah, I think it's 108 or 188.
Probably 108. That's a common number that's used for repetitions. And the Angulimala mantra 7 times. I'm not really sure where the numbers come from. So the numbers are developments of later Buddhist traditions. But usually there's some significance to them. So there's a few numbers which are commonly used. The basic one is 3. So if you're going to do repetitions, you do at least 3 times. 7 is also common. Then when you get numbers above 7, then 49, 108. Then above that, you get into numbers like 1,000, 10,000, and so on. So the numbers themselves, I wouldn't put too much importance on, but rather it's the idea of constantly repeating as a way of driving it deeply into the mind. And this can be really powerful. So I remember during one of the all-night meditation programs at Abhayagiri, a small group of the monks, including myself, we just kept chanting the Itipiso over and over again for 2 or 3 hours. And after a certain point, if you're chanting the same thing over and over again, you get to a certain point where the mind just stops doing anything else. Everything else just drops away. And the mind is entirely focused only on repeating the chant. And that can be a form of samadhi in itself. And for some people, this is an incredibly powerful way of preparing the mind for meditation practice. But it's also a very wholesome thing to do. It's if you're going to be producing mental activity, producing verbal activity, well, you might as well produce something wholesome. So the Itipiso Gata is the recollecting the qualities of Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. It's a very wholesome thing to repeat. Most of the parittas are based upon calling forward some aspect of the Dhamma or some event from the time of the Buddha. And based upon that, forming a wish for people to be happy, healthy, and safe. So the Angulimala paritta is an example of that. So Angulimala, after he attained awakening, at one point he was going through a village and he saw a pregnant woman who was having a very difficult pregnancy. So she was in a lot of pain, and there was a lot of uncertainty as to how things were going to turn out. And so he said a short blessing chant for her, and then after he gave this blessing chant, said this blessing chant for the pregnant woman, then she gave birth easily without any complications. So that short incident from the time of the Buddha has then been the basis to this day of when a pregnant woman is having some difficulty. Then she'll come to the monks, and the monks will chant the Angulimala Paritta. And usually you do it at least 3 times, but more is always acceptable. And there's many others. So the Ratana Sutta is commonly used in times of illness, and especially in times of plague. So since the pandemic started, Ratana Sutta chanting has had a resurgence of popularity. So we just chanted it earlier today. So many parittas have a specific traditional usage, usually related to the origin of that paritta or the content of that paritta. Others are more general. So the Yatipiso Gata is a more general purpose paritta. You can use it for anything, pretty much. Though the Buddha did say it's particularly good for fear. When you're having any kind of fear, you recite the Yatipiso a few times. And that has a way of pushing fear out of the mind. Yeah, there's many which are just general purpose parittas, and others which have a more specific usage. Yeah, those are a few general thoughts on paritta chanting. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Bhante. And Sud asks, hello, Venerables. How does one know if one is truly progressing in their spiritual path? How do I know I'm going in the right direction? Well, this one is very easy. Essentially, by asking your questions, 2 questions. Are unwholesome mind states diminishing, and are wholesome mind states increasing? And if wholesome mind states are increasing, great. If unwholesome mind states are decreasing, great. If the opposite answer, then you need to reevaluate your practice and make some adjustments. Some can even entail, changing, making some radical changes. Also for monastics, the Buddha said, that even if, all our requisites, for example, are covered in a place and everything is all right, if we're not actually making progress in this way, we should be leaving. And on the flip side, if our requisites are not being met, or we're struggling, but we're making progress in the path to actually stay. So we see that, this is kind of connected to what he also says, to be the heirs of his Dhamma, not of the material goods. So we want to always make sure that we are increasing in terms of spiritual practice, not in terms of, just how great things are in samsara. So that's precisely, slightly different, but the same thing for lay people, because ultimately we have the same goal. I don't know if Bhante, you want to add anything else?
I think that covers it pretty well. One thing I would add to that is that it does also help to, from time to time, go to a respected spiritual teacher. So especially a senior monastic, one who knows you and has had some ongoing relationship with you. That's usually best. Periodically go to them and tell them what you've been doing and what's been happening, and ask them for advice. That can be really helpful, because often our own self-perception is quite distorted. So it's very helpful to get the voice of another, and especially the voice of a advanced practitioner, optimally a monastic teacher. Yep.
Yeah, that's very important. Thank you, Bhante. Lee says, good evening, Venerables. After an experience where the body disappeared, I developed a fear of entering a different state, which was blocking it from happening again. Now the fear has gone and I'm experiencing excitement, wanting, which is now what blocks it. Besides just allowing it to happen, is there some action you'd recommend to overcome this excitement? Bhante?
Well, first off, I just want to point out that the body disappearing is not necessarily a desirable thing to happen during meditation. In fact, 90% of the time, that's a bad sign. It's usually a sign of a loss of mindfulness. rather than a sign of any genuine progress. So the body can disappear during meditation under a couple good conditions. One is in very advanced samadhi. So I'm talking fourth jhana and beyond. So when you're getting into the arupa samadhis, they're called arupa because arupa means no body. So in the arupa samadhis, your body has disappeared. So these are, again, very advanced stages of samadhi, which are you start to touch in fourth jhana and beyond. So unless you're an extremely advanced jhana practitioner, that's not what's happening. The other circumstances in which the body can seem to dissolve or disappear, one is in very advanced stages of practicing anicca sanya, the recognition of impermanence. That can also lead to an experience where the body seems to disappear. And another case is, again, in very advanced stages of practicing silent illumination, in the Pali tradition, anamitta samadhi. So these are conditions where the body can seem to disappear, where it's actually good. But in all of those, there is extremely strong mindfulness. So extremely strong mindfulness and extremely strong samadhi. So check your mind. If your body is disappearing, make sure that your mindfulness is extremely strong and the mind is extremely steady and stable. And if it's just happening by itself, well, pay closer attention. What's going on? You should be making some kind of deliberate intention, like now I am going to practice this kind of meditation. So whether it's arupa samadhi or whether it's anicca sanya or whether it's silent illumination, you should have a clear determination as to what kind of meditation you're trying to do. And also why you're doing that and its place in the Buddhist path. So the disappearance of one's body is not in and of itself a desirable experience, nor is it necessarily a sign of progress on the path to awakening. But it can be a side effect of these three kinds of meditation. It rarely happens under other conditions, except again as a consequence of a lack of mindfulness. So again, check that. And yeah, so whether you're afraid of your body disappearing, well, that's a problem because the truth is your body is disappearing every single moment. So you need to get over that fear because it's happening whether you want it to or not. And being excited about your body disappearing is also kind of silly because it's happening whether you're excited about it or not. It's happening. So fear and excitement are both completely irrelevant. It's kind of like I'm afraid of the sun coming up in the morning. Or I'm excited about the sun setting in the evening. It's like, well, why? There's nothing to be afraid of and there's nothing to be excited about. So those are a few thoughts on the matter. But the really important thing, once again, is to make sure that your mindfulness is extremely sharp and clear and strong. Because usually, when people say their body disappears during meditation, usually it's because their mindfulness has become weak, not for any good reason. Okay.
Thank you, Bante. And Alex says, good evening. Good to see you, Alex. And Anumodana for all the help you've been giving with the work on the website. And Alex asks, I have a question about Devas. Does the Buddha ever speak about the relationship between Devas and humans? Should offerings be made to Devas, or is this a fruitless endeavor? Well, the Devas are present like all over the suttas, so there's definitely a lot of talk of Devas in the suttas. A lot of times in the West, the teachings of the Buddha are presented in this very scientific way, which is true. It's very much in there. I perceive them as very scientific teachings. But the supernatural is also scientific. So I think that's why some people are surprised that there is talks of devas and superpowers and, all other things that are not the physical world, so to speak. So one of the things that I actually like the most, that I find very helpful in terms of the relationship with devas, is actually to Devanusati, so the recollection of the devas, but in particular how the Buddha invites us to recollect all the acts of kindness and goodness that we do, and to reflect on how those are qualities that the devas have, and how basically we are cultivating a deva mind to begin with, and also when we are practicing all the Brahma Viharas, those are divine abodes, divine dwellings. In terms of offerings made to devas, actually, you can see in every single Buddhist country that I'm aware of. In particular, obviously, in Chinese Buddhism, they actually, I think, formalized it very well. So if you go to places like Changyan Monastery, there is actually, a huge space with all the different deities, where usually the Buddhists will go, and you don't ask the Buddha for a promotion. You will ask a deva for a bit of a help in that domain. So there's plenty of offerings in there. Then I haven't been to Sri Lanka, but I'm aware that I've been told anyway that usually Buddhists will go to the temple. To the Buddhist temple, and then they will also have a separate deva kind of temple where once again they will go refer to if they are in need of something particular in their worldly life. So there is this sense of actually in Sri Lankan temples, a lot of Sri Lankan temples that I've been here in the West, there's actually the deva room where you open it up, and there's a lot of usually deities that are familiar perhaps for the Hinduism, but there's also a lot of other Christian and other different deities that are all devas, and they can all help us and support us in our practice. This being said, Bhante Sudasa is a big fan of devas, contrarily, not that I'm not a fan of devas, but he is more so. So probably you can speak more to it.
I think you covered everything.
Oh, I have the deva approval. Good.
Yeah, Thai temples also have a deva room often. Chinese temples, as you mentioned, it seems to be pretty much universal across all Buddhist cultures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But it's important to keep in mind that devas can't help you attain awakening. They can protect you, and they can maybe help you be a little more lucky, but they can't help you attain awakening. Only you can do that.
And Sud said, "Dear Venerables, in loving kindness meditation, when you get to the point where you are wishing all beings to be well, the loving kindness feeling appears. What does one do afterwards? Sometimes it goes from being calming to agitating afterwards." Okay.
Well, usually once the loving kindness feeling appears, then you focus on that feeling. So that becomes the object of the meditation. So you focus, you let go of any concept of self and other, and you just focus on the metta feeling itself, on magnifying that and focusing one's mind entirely on it. As for calming versus agitating, I actually have never had an experience of loving kindness being agitating, but I have often experienced it being energizing. So the mind becoming very awake and alert and sharp, very energetic. Again, kind of the feeling like you just had a good cup of tea, and the mind is bright and sharp, very awake and alert. So that's a good thing. So make sure you're not confusing alertness with agitation. If you actually are getting agitated with doing metta, then you might actually focus on mindfulness of the body for a while. So soothing the mind, settling the mind down, but try to keep that gentleness and friendliness in the mind as you practice mindfulness of the body. That might help. I haven't had experience with agitation coming up during metta, but I have had like very strong energy and alertness come up. So make sure that you're distinguishing between those two states. Those are my thoughts. Do you have any thoughts on this?
No, I think that's good. Yeah. And Mary says, my brother is experiencing a pinched nerve in his spine and is suffering extreme pain. He's having surgery this Monday. Would you send Robert some good healing karma? Thank you all. Well, I'm sorry, Mary, that your brother is going through this, and obviously you as well. It's always difficult to have loved ones, to see them experiencing pain. We can't send him good healing karma, but we can send him good healing blessings. And we'll be very happy to do that. Actually, we'll put it on the schedule on Monday, since his surgery is on Monday. Yeah, so we'll do it first thing in our morning puja and put it in. Actually, yes. Do you mind taking a note? Actually, Mary, if you can also send us a message with his name, that would be good. May he be well and happy. May all good things come to him and you as well. And Ian says, hello, Venerables. I was wondering if you could speak more on the everything is karma that has been mentioned in the past. When I looked more into this, one source from Sayadaw Titila listed 5 niyamas as explaining everything. I know little about this, so I was curious on your thoughts. Well, that's the fun thing about Buddhist traditions, that you'll find monastics say things that can sound apparently in opposition or different. Even the Buddha himself, sometimes he can say one thing and then say another thing afterwards that seems in contradiction with what he just earlier said, which is why it's actually quite dangerous to only take suttas or quotes, even though we live in the quotes era. Nobody has time anymore to go through so much. It has to be like a small short message or an Instagram caption, Facebook caption. But it's actually very important to the reason why the Buddha explained, at least this is my interpretation, why he explain the teachings in so many different ways over and over again, is for us to kind of understand the gist, the core, the Dhamma. And words are not, fully, they kind of point towards the direction, but they're not fully in and of itself the answer. So yeah, usually in the Burmese tradition, they put a lot of emphasis in the Abhidhamma. So my understanding is that the elements that you just described, they are the Abhidhamma understanding of karma, and the subdivision of all these different ways of explaining reality. But another way to say that, to understand karma, is by saying everything is karma, and not in the way that it's fatalistic. That's very important. Not that there's this sort of predestination and we can't do anything, but rather coming from what the Buddha says in the most famous verse of the Dhammapada, the initial verse of the Dhammapada: the mind is the forerunner of all things. So we karma means action, and obviously every action has a result. So in every moment we're experiencing vipaka. So maybe you can say everything is vipaka. Rather. So our experience of reality right now is of vipaka. And right now we're also making new karma, which will generate new vipaka in the future. So yeah, in the Tibetan tradition, they go in extreme detail in kind of dissecting how everything actually is karma, or everything is vipaka, or rather everything is karma vipaka. And it's quite fascinating, actually. I highly recommend the talks from Venerable Robina Cortin. She actually is extremely good, at least I think so, in explaining all of these processes like in detail. Also, her Dhamma talks, she manages to put all the content of 3 hours in 1 hour, so so you can cover a lot of grounds in a short amount of time. Understanding the theory behind karma is the way to start, but then looking at your reality in every single moment. Actually, it's kind of like I think a karma. I was thinking about it the other day as a bit of an algorithm. You know how these days, like all our online whatever stuff that we do is constantly monitored by all the big corporations, right? So as soon as you start making karma, making actions of like looking at something in particular, then all these websites starts communicating everywhere, right? So you open another website, you have advertising of that, like, I don't know, football related thing that you watched. So you kind of have all these, you have all this vipaka that is coming, even though you're not making any action of that sort in that moment, you are reaping the results of your actions from the past. So you can think of it maybe as an algorithm, just a few words. Do you have anything to add on that, Bhante?
And that's pretty thorough. One thing I would say, though, is to read the suttas, all of them, cover to cover. I say that about once a day, I think.
That's true.
Yeah, I mean, I really mean it when I say this. Read the suttas cover to cover and use that as your basis. So we can get into a lot of trouble when we rely upon secondary sources. So Sayadaw so-and-so, Bhante so-and-so, Ajahn so-and-so, Ayya so-and-so, they might have lots of interesting things to say, but we're not the Buddha.
Also, Ayya so-and-so is also close to Ayya so-and-ma.
Bhante so-and-so, Bhante Sudaso, Ayya so-and-so, so-ma. Yeah, be careful with the so-and-sos. But read the suttas. And use the suttas as your ultimate basis. And if you read the suttas, you'll see how much emphasis the Buddha puts on karma as being the critical shaping force in our life. So I'm sure Sayadaw U Titila probably said lots of interesting things, but he wasn't the Buddha. So if I have to compare between the two, I'll pick what the Buddha said.
Right, thank you, Bhante. And Protodhamma says, Manana, Bhante and Anya, have you ever experienced meditating and the silence becoming so loud and overwhelming? I have not. And Bhante?
Loud, yes. Overwhelming, no. That was easy. Next one.
Yeah. Thinking about, usually... the sound becoming loud is pretty great. Overwhelming and silence. I'm thinking maybe when I heard, but that was actually the sound of the sirens and the music in Rockaway Beach. Then that was more, it became so loud that at a certain point it was overwhelming. But the silence, no. And Kumu says, of all the meditation methods, what is the one you use the most on a daily basis and the reason? Bhante?
Well, these days I've been doing a lot of metta. That's mainly because I'm super grumpy. So if I don't do a lot of metta, everybody around me knows it. And usually Ayya Soma starts saying things like, Bhante, you're really grumpy. You need to do more metta. And I'm like, I know. So that's the main reason. I actually don't like doing metta, TBH, but I do it as a gift to the people in my life. Other than metta, I do a lot of mindfulness of the body. I also like to use silent illumination quite a bit. That's one of my favorites. Those are kind of my top 3. Ayasala?
Well, thank you for practicing metta, Bhante. We're all very grateful. And Usually, actually, these days I've been doing a lot of mindfulness of decrepitude. I'm not kidding. It's actually been since November, December. Decrepitude, death, sickness. So I injured my foot. One of my biggest attachments is attachment to health, which has been considerably put to test as I'm getting older, and in particular in the past year, 2 years. So yeah, then I how do you say, twisted my ankle, and it's been now a month and a half, because I think because of the old age, my body is getting it's taking longer to fix itself. So much dukkha. So anyway, so this realization, and also the realization, recollecting the old age of my mother, the old age of actually Stan the cat too, like the old age and everyone that I care about, that is around me, and of my own self. And also like recollecting the times when I was kind of perhaps horrified by certain diseases that physical diseases that other people could have had due to old age. There can be some things that your body starts falling apart, and so recollecting actually what the Buddha tells us, like, oh, why are we so horrified by something that is actually our nature, to have the same exact sort of destiny. So yeah, so kind of I'm imagining, not imagining, recollecting like the slow decomposition of the body, and coming into peace with peace, not into peace pieces. Hopefully I'll still be one piece for a little longer. But coming into terms with all those different things. Maybe I'll need help, going to the bathroom in a couple of years, who knows, or lots of different things that your body is not independent anymore, or functioning anymore. So I've been doing that recollection, and mindfulness of emotions, my good old friend. After I do this, a lot of sometimes unpleasant, especially when it comes to people that I love, might surface. So I'm doing mindfulness of emotions. Actually, I really appreciated that tip from Brother Taplu last night. He gave a talk on climate change, which had nothing to do with what I'm talking about right now. Well, it does, but in a different way. And actually, it was very interesting. I practiced it with it today when he mentioned about going to, when you're practicing mindfulness of emotions, to go to your bone structure and finding some sort of peace and grounding in the solidity of that. So I incorporated that. So maybe I'm going, this is long story, very, very long. Now I'm going to tell you all the history of my life from Adam and Eve, so I'll stop. And Julie says, how to feel one's time outside of formal meditation. I have made so much space for meditation that now I feel at a loss and even feel bored. I feel confused. Any advice? Thank you, Venerables. That's great. I mean, not that you feel bored, but just keep meditating.
Yeah, well, and also practice mindfulness continuously, whether you're practicing meditation or not. Practice continuous mindfulness and equanimity. Also study. Study the suttas, read the suttas when you're not meditating, chant. So especially reciting things from the suttas or during traditional Buddhist chanting. Follow the Noble Eightfold Path, whatever you're doing. Make every moment meditation. Meditation is not just what you do when you're sitting down. Meditation is every moment when you're cultivating a wholesome mind. So make every moment of your life meditation. So constant mindfulness and equanimity, read the suttas, do chanting, bring an attitude of kindness, gentleness, and presence to everything that you do. Okay?
you, Bante. And Sud says, Dear Venables, even though intellectually one understands impermanence and practices diligently if one dies before having realization, how can one ensure another birth exposure to the Dhamma? Well, I would say by creating an affinity to the Sangha, with the Sangha. So, yeah, merit. The Buddha says not to be afraid of merit. It's actually so beautiful in the suttas when he says that. Yeah, merit does bring this constant, good feeling, good vibes towards the practice. Our friends, some of our Thai friends yesterday, 2 days ago, I can't remember. They gave some, aside from the meal, they gave some gifts, and it was this beautiful ceremony after lunch. And it was so full of joy, so full of, just wholesome qualities. And it was beautiful to watch, being on the receiving end. But even if I wasn't on the receiving end, Jens is nodding because he was there here, and Agarika Jens was there. Yeah, it was very beautiful. And so you see how all those people obviously have an association, a really wholesome association with the triple gem, that are nurturing in this life. And they have been nurturing it for probably countless lives in order to have the conditions to be born in a Buddhist country, and for it to then be something natural and spontaneous. So it's incredible good karma to be born in a place where the Dhamma is there, this means that every kind of opportunity for them is a great opportunity to come to the temple. They have a really positive association. They're not like, oh dear, to go to that meditation retreat, contemplate impermanence. It's not just, they will also do that. They will also come to the temple and meditate. But primarily, it's the association is of happiness. Is a good association. It's not like we tend to think, okay, fun is going to the bar, or fun is like watching the movies, or fun is X, Y, and Z. And then I need to go on a diet. I need to eat vegetables. I need to go to the meditation center / monastery. But instead, if we actually put the first, we put going to the monastery as a joyful act, something that brings happiness to the mind much more than any type of sexual pleasure, then I think we create the conditions in order to have access to the Dhamma.
Yeah.
Do you have any other suggestions, Bhagat?
Yeah, well, one very important component is to have the aspiration to be born close to the Dhamma. So this is commonly included in many aspiration chants in actually every Buddhist tradition, every Theravada country, Mahayana country. Commonly at some point in the aspiration chanting, there will be the wish, if I don't attain awakening in this life, may I always be born with access to the Dhamma. So it's phrased differently in different traditions, but the basic spirit is the same. So have that firm intention. May I always be born close to the Dhamma until I finally attain awakening. So the Buddha says in the Sankharuppapatti Sutta, he quite clearly states that if you cultivate sufficient good karma, sufficient merit, then you can influence your rebirths. You can even determine your rebirths if you have enough good karma. So you can determine to be reborn in a heavenly mansion with lots of parties, or you can choose to be reborn in a Buddhist country with lots of monks. So choose wisely. How are you going to spend your karma?
Great.
You have a question? Go ahead.
So this doesn't really have to do with anything with getting enlightened. But I did want to know, what does the Buddha say about horoscopes?
He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything about horoscopes.
Maybe Bante rephrase so the people.
Our resident is asking if the Buddha said anything about horoscopes. And the answer is no, he didn't. No. They're very briefly mentioned as one of the things that bhikkhus and bhikkhunis should not be doing as a job. Interestingly, it doesn't specifically say that we can't do horoscopes. It just says that we shouldn't be doing it as a form of livelihood. That's just about the only mention the Buddha ever makes of horoscopes or astrology or fortune telling or anything like that. So it's clearly something that was going on in the Buddha's time. It just wasn't something the Buddha saw fit to talk about.
So it's in the Vibhanga, right?
What's that?
It's in the Vibhanga, but it could be later on.
No, it's also mentioned in the Digha Nikaya in a few
Is
places.
it?
Yeah. Clearly it wasn't something the Buddha saw as being significant one way or the other. Yeah, I wouldn't put too much thought on it. Keeping in mind also that when people get into the domain of fortune telling, then it's often coming from an idea of predestination and predeterminism, which is not exactly a Buddhist concept. So an example of this is there's some places in the suttas where the Buddha says, I can look at someone's mind and I can say, if this person continues to act the way they've been acting, then they will be reborn under such and such conditions. And he says, it's just like if you see a person walking along a road that leads towards a chasm, a pit. Then you can say, if they keep walking in that direction, they're going to fall into that pit. And then later on, the Buddha's like, then later on you see them and they've fallen into the pit and they're suffering. And you're like, well, saw that one coming. But the important thing here is the if statement. If they continue the way they're behaving, then they will get that result. So this is not a fatalistic or predetermined way of looking at the world. It's recognizing that we always have the ability to change our karma in the sense of changing the choices that we're making, which then will change our destiny. So destiny is never fixed in Buddhism. It's always in flux. It's always changing based upon the choices that we're making in each moment. So fortune telling then, from a Buddhist standpoint, is pretty unreliable because people are always making new choices, which means their destiny is always shifting. So even if fortune telling was accurate, and it might be, so maybe it was accurate yesterday, but then you made some different choices. So now whatever fortune was told is no longer accurate. So I wouldn't put too much significance on it. Those are my thoughts. Do you have any thoughts?
No, I think that covers it pretty well. Thank you, Bante. And Mark,
you missed one.
Actually, there's our resident.
For either one of you, could you briefly go through the 7 factors of enlightenment, but more specifically, how one factor is supposed to lead to another through pursuing that factor?
That's a whole
Either
Dhamma talk.
I know it's long. That's
yeah.
How about next week we do a sutta on that one or Dhamma talk on that one?
Yeah, I agree. That's not a short answer. That's a full.
Yeah,
that's a full length talk. It's a great topic, but it's a full length talk.
In the Buddha's words, by Bhikkhu Bodhi, this came up, and Buddha says, by pursuing this factor arises, and by pursuing that, it occurred to me how is.
Make a note and especially refer to the sutta that you're talking about.
Okay.
And we'll do a more in-depth talk on it soon.
Yeah. And Sud asks, what is Upachara Samadhi and how does one reach or recognize if one is in it or experiencing it? Bante?
Well, the word upachara literally means getting close. It's from the prefix upa, which means close or near, and chara, which means to go. So upachara samadhi is when you're getting close to first jhana. I should say, as a matter of full disclosure, this term does not appear in the suttas. This is a apocryphal term, but it is a term that I find useful because it's pointing to the fact that, as I was saying, I think yesterday maybe, like the development of samadhi, including jhana states, is gradual. So it's not like you're at like 0 samadhi, 0 samadhi, 0 samadhi, 0 samadhi, bam, first jhana, bam, second jhana. It's more like gradually building up and building up and building up and building up your samadhi. And now you're in first jhana, building up, building up, building up. Now you're in second jhana, building up, building up. So it's more like a gradual progression. So Upachara Samadhi. So if we arbitrarily say that first jhana is 50% samadhi, then Upachara is when you're maybe somewhere around 40%, 45%. Like you're getting close, just as the word Upachara means. You're getting close to first jhana, but you're not quite there yet. So Upachara Samadhi, it will be characterized by strongly resembling jhana, but not quite all the way there. So the mind is still a little bit wobbly, a little bit distracted, a little bit hazy. But otherwise, many of the aspects of jhana are present. They're just not fully developed yet. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Bante. And Mark asks, if all life is suffering because of desire, then why does karma matter? So I would say if all life is suffering, that's not exactly correct, but it says more correct translation is my understanding. But to correct me, there is suffering.
Yeah, idang dukkam.
Yeah, rather than all life is suffering, because we can get a little bit creative with our interpretations then of the Dhamma. Yeah, well, because of desire, then why does karma matter? Well, karma, once again, as we were saying earlier, is an action. So how do you end something? By doing something. And also, why is there suffering? Because you're doing something. So it's not that desire is just this sort of abstract thing, but we're actually doing something in order to create desire in our mind, and we can do something in order to eliminate desire in our mind. So it's not like the teachings of the Buddha are not this how do you say, mystical practice. They're actually very practical and down to earth, as I was saying earlier. They are scientific. The Devas are scientific. The other world is scientific. All of it is scientific. So there is causality, just as we see in science, in Western science. We see concepts of causality. It's the same with the Buddhist teachings. So you start observing by refraining from doing certain things, then you will be loosening your desire. Well, first of all, you'll become aware that you have certain desires to begin with, actually. A lot of it we are completely oblivious of. We're, filled up with delusion. So we don't look at it. So the first thing is that we become aware of desire present in our life, navigating every single aspect. And in some places, it's more strong than in others. And why is that so? Because we have made sure to strengthen our obsession, with food, or obsession with sexuality, our obsession with lying, our obsession with stealing. There are so many different ways through which we do that. So then, of course, the practices that the Buddha gives us out of compassion of sila are the quickest way, actually, that we see in how we start loosening. Well, we become aware once again, and we start also loosening. We start refraining. We do actions. Because non-harming is actually an action, is a karma that leads to the end, to the cessation of that desire. I used to want to kill so many different sentient beings, not humans, not like cats, but definitely lots of mosquitoes. Right now, it's impossible for my mind to kill. There's no desire to do that anymore. Has eradicated. And so has my suffering in relation to killing. Therefore, isn't that incredible? So we see how these teachings become actually pragmatic, become something that we feel. The Dhamma invites us in for us to see for ourselves. And we're like, oh, yes, okay. I didn't even know I was creating all that suffering in my mind. Maybe we can get to the point of, well, probably the mosquitoes weren't that happy to be killed by, former layperson, the Italian layperson. But, my previous self at least was kind of like, well, who cares? I'm much happier now that the mosquitoes have been exterminated, so I can enjoy my patio here without them disturbing me. So the avidya, so the ignorance, was preventing me from actually understanding the incredible suffering that I was doing first and foremost to myself, the incredible irritation that I was cultivating. So all of those are actions, all karma. So you become aware, you stop doing it, great. Wonderful. No suffering anymore. Yes?
I wonder, is there a Pali word for belief? And what does the Buddha say about belief?
Probably the most directly correlate word would be saddha, which commonly gets translated as faith, sometimes as confidence, but actually I think faith is a good translation. So actually the Buddha says it's important to have faith. First of all, faith that the Buddha was fully awakened. And faith that following the Dhamma leads to the same awakening. But he also talks about the importance of not going simply on tradition, or not just going on what your teacher says, or not going on what's included in a scripture, but rather to constantly look at your own experience to confirm what you're being taught. So ultimately, the arising of faith then is coming not just from blind belief, but rather it's through a careful examination of the concepts that are being passed down through the tradition. So we actually do have open license to disagree with the Buddha. Try to prove him wrong. Good luck, by the way. But yeah, try. The Buddha says there is dukkha. Well, is that true or is that not? Look at your own mind. Is there dukkha? See for yourself.
How about doubt? I've heard in some tradition they say, Buddhism, they say doubt is like a hindrance. But then in other tradition, I've heard it said to cultivate doubt.
Well, there's two kinds of doubt. So this is where there comes up a difference. So the Pali term is vicikiccha, which I prefer to translate as skepticism. So it's the mind which automatically wants to reject things. Whereas the kind of doubt that they talk about, for example, in Chan Buddhism and some of the Zen schools, is the questioning doubt. So the mind which really wants to know, and which therefore wants to question and examine very closely so that we can understand fully. So the skeptic is someone who's like, oh yeah, there's no such thing as that, so I'm not going to waste my time with it. Whereas the questioner is someone who's like, I don't know and I want to find out, so I'm going to dig into this until I know for myself through direct experience. So yeah, in the Chan tradition, they sometimes talk about cultivating great doubt. And what they mean by that is cultivating this intense desire to know for yourself what's true and what's not true. Because that intense desire to know will lead you to examine your experience very closely until you confirm the Dhamma for yourself. So it's very different from skeptical doubt. Skeptical doubt is like, it's impossible to know these things. I'm just going to go to the bar and watch some movies and life is great. Actually, it doesn't matter whether life is great or not, because you can never know what's good or what's bad. So I'll just go and get drunk and who cares? Like, that's skeptical doubt, and that doesn't do anybody any good. But the questioning doubt, that's useful. Does that clear that up?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Great. And Amaranta asks, then I started reading again the Majjhima Nikaya, and I'm still trying to understand the First Suta. Do you think it's necessary to look for other commentaries? Bhante?
So every now and then Ayasoma gets in this mood where she just keeps shunting all the questions over to me. But okay, fair enough, fine. I usually recommend, so the First Sutta of the Majjhima Nikaya is notoriously difficult to understand. So I recommend reading all the suttas, because that particular sutta only really makes sense within the context of the entire Sutta Pitaka. If you take it by itself, you're going to be confused. But if you take it as part of a vast body of Buddhist literature, then it starts to make more sense. So if you want a very brief explanation, the basic thrust of that sutta, as I understand it, is that our concepts are not reality. So the sutta is constantly saying one forms a concept about earth, but that's not what earth actually is. You form a concept about the Devas, but that's not what they actually are. You can even form concepts about Nibbana, but that's also not what it really is. So the first portion of that sutta is he's all talking about how a suttama patujana, so the uneducated commoner, the unwise ordinary person, they have concepts about all kinds of things, even concepts about very high-minded spiritual Buddhist concepts. But they're just concepts. They're just ideas in their mind. They don't have any reality. One of my favorite quotes that turns up in a few suttas, the Buddha says, whatever you think it is, reality is different from that. So he's pointing, so in the first part of the Mulapariyaya Sutta, the Buddha is saying, like, you can have concepts about devas and dhamma and karma and nibbana, but those concepts are not real. They're not the reality. In the Zen tradition, they say, eating a painting of rice does not satisfy your hunger. So similarly, having a concept of nibbana does not take away your suffering. But then when the Buddha starts talking about awakened beings, and towards the end of that sutta, he's talking about somebody who directly knows these things. So then it's no longer a concept, it's an experience. So you're actually, in the Zen example, you're actually eating the rice. So you know what rice is, and also your hunger is starting to disappear. And then the arhat is someone who's fully understood. So they've completed the meal. They understand what rice is, and all their hunger is gone. So this is what the Buddha is doing in that sutta, as I understand it. He's first pointing out that our concepts are not reality. So what we think reality is not what it actually is. And that it's only through direct experience that we can actually come to understand what the Dhamma is talking about. Otherwise, it's just thoughts, it's just ideas, it's just words. Okay.
Panten, Michael asked, do you recommend doing samadhi body meditations when you have a painful injury? I actually find it very helpful. One, because the pain, I mean, you inevitably want to look at it. Like, usually if something is very painful, it's difficult to pay attention to anything else. So yeah, it's a great advantage. You're naturally focused. And also it's a great opportunity to cultivate not only samadhi, but vipassana as well. So you actually can, for example, look at what pain feels like, understand what pain feels like. Yeah, and look at it. Yeah, I've been also doing that actually in the past couple of days, actually, in particular, since my injury has been hurting more than it was last month. So yeah, it's a great opportunity. And Dave says, how important is having a teacher in the practice of the Dhamma? Absolutely important.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, you tend to just do in your own delusions.
Yeah. Yeah, in fact, as monastics, yeah, it's part of our training to take nisaya, to take dependence. Sometimes, people can overlook that. And yeah, in reality, that's not, yeah, that can be extremely detrimental. First of all, we want to become more and more humble, and we want to eradicate ignorance. It's very difficult when it's you yourself and, when I'm by myself, me, myself, and I, we all agree with me. Me, myself, and I. They're all like, yeah, this is great. On the same page. Sometimes we also tend to surround ourselves with people who, are kind of our, echo chamber. Yeah. So, for example, as a layperson, yeah, all my friends, I knew exactly who to call if I wanted, to get a certain type of advice. It was very predictable. And now I want for my friends to tell me I'm right. Let me call my friend such and such. Oh, yeah, you're right. That person is horrible. Then I call the other one. Yeah, you're right. That person is horrible. And then, I was like, yeah, I'm definitely great. And that person is horrible. So instead, in monastic life, it's all pretty random. So you don't really, you get to pick, but to a certain degree, you get to pick your teacher. But realistically, there's always, it's a bit of a different sort of situation than in lay life. So yeah, very important to be part of a community and have one point of reference, preferably even more than one, that can lead you in the right direction. And always ask questions. Yeah, always ask questions. And if you think you're a stream mentor, for example, and the majority of people tell you that you're not a stream mentor, maybe the other people are right. It's quite amusing sometimes when you find the biographies of the ones that have the business card Arahant. I was reading a biography of this person, and he's like, yeah, I went on this retreat and I spoke to the teacher and he told me, no, you're not, you don't have these accomplishments. I was like, yeah, no, I didn't believe him. And then I went to this other teacher. He said me the same thing. So then he went to this other teacher, and the other teacher also told him the same thing. So then he was like, okay, I'm not going to believe any of these people, and I'm just going to be a teacher and self-declare. So we see, actually, it's a great example, of something that could happen to us if we're not careful enough. We can laugh about it with other people, but arrogance, oh my God, arrogance in the spiritual path is incredible. As Venerable Robina Corten says, people think, they go on a retreat, a meditation retreat, and then afterwards, they have like a nice experience, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to start teaching people the the guru X, Y, and Z, and writing this book, and it's a bestseller. This capitalist machine, just as long as you can prepackage things. But yeah, no bueno. And Alex says, what is the function of the Jataka tales? Are they the real memories of the Buddha's past lives?
So in the Theravada tradition, there's a bit over 500 Jataka tales. About 50 of those are actually from the suttas. The rest are apocryphal and of uncertain origin. So if you really get interested in the Jataka tales, I recommend sorting out which are from the suttas and which are apocrypha. As for their function, actually in the suttas, when the Buddha brings up memories of his past lives, he's usually bringing it up for a reason. He's not just like, now it's story time and I'm going to tell a story. Like, he has a reason why he's bringing it up, and it's usually to communicate some element of the Dhamma. So that's the function that they serve. The Jataka tales they serve the function of communicating some particular aspect of Dhamma. But you do need to be careful, again, with the apocryphal Jataka tales. The ones from the suttas are harmless. But some of the apocryphal Jataka tales are a little bit weird, and the message is not always quite on point. So that's, again, because many of those were later compositions by other authors, and who knows what they were thinking.
Yes.
I want to ask about where does Buddhism fit in terms of religions and philosophies in the world? It's certainly different from Christianity or Islam in that there's not a Bible per se in Buddhism, or if you were to call the original Tripitaka a Bible, it would be extremely vast, right? And then there's all these commentaries and things like that. So is Buddhism kind of from maybe a sociological perspective, I don't know if that's the right word, but a broader perspective, is it a school of philosophy? Is it religion? Is it a way of life? I know it operates in these different ways, but I wonder if you could say something about that.
I think it's just semantics.
Just semantics.
Yeah, I don't think it really matters what you call Buddhism. Buddhism is what it is. It's the path to awakening. Whether you want to call it a religion or a philosophy or a way of life or whatever, it doesn't really matter to me. What do you think?
Yeah, that usually, I mean, in Western contexts, a religion is defined as a belief in a creator God. So, and that's because obviously our definition is from Judeo-Christian. So in that sense, then, Buddhism does not match that definition. It's not a religion. But then if you go in the realm of Eastern spirituality, actually a lot of Eastern religions are not actually religions in terms of like the our definition. Maybe Hinduism, yes, but and also Hinduism. Actually, we call Hinduism a million different types of religion. So even there, some might be different than the others. But yeah, I agree with Bhante. It's just semantics. It's good to clarify perhaps the definitions that one has, like what is actually religion. But if you take the meaning of religion to be something that then becomes, the sort of center of your life, the way that explains your reality, the way that shapes your morality, then yeah, Buddhism is a religion, and it's a great religion too. It's a wonderful religion. I mean, I have become, a religious fanatic from being someone who was agnostic, borderline atheist. So my life before was very non-religious. Now it's very religious, but that doesn't mean that I have a creator God or whatever. Or there are some things I think that overlap maybe, and that's where the confusion starts. Especially, I come from Italy. We have monasticism, etc. Like there are certain things that might be apparently similar, but they're also radically different. And actually, the forms of monasticism that we have, they come from Asia originally. I didn't even know, but yeah. I mean, they're very heavily inspired by Hinduism and Buddhism. You go to Eremo di Camaldoli, which is one of the biggest, oldest monasteries, founded by Saint Benedict 1,000 years ago. And they have the history of monasticism, and it starts with the Jains and the Buddha. And with the Buddha actually being celebrated as the most awesome individual in the history of monasticism, because he actually created a quote unquote religion based on monasticism. It was not a later development. It was not something that was created after his death or that was secondary. So it's actually quite interesting when you start seeing also history in that perspective. But yeah, I would say the experience is very religious. Also, going to, when we went, for example, to Christian monasteries, there is something that is very religious about that. And it's not only, crosses, and there's something I was feeling there. Like when I go to Catholic monasteries in Italy, I feel the Devas. It's the only time where I am very much in tune with the divine. So there's all that part that if we get, I feel like in the West, when we get too focused on, it's just the way of life, it's just not the religion, etc. It's actually to discard all the sort of the flavors that, and also the way that are practiced in Asia, in traditional Asian Buddhism. This is what I see normally. It becomes a sort of algorithm of like, do this, do that. It's only focused on meditation. And I think actually that has to do more with sort of the past of racism that can be in certain Western countries, and of the tendencies towards appropriation, rather than the fact that those are actually really the teachings of the Buddha. So, I might have.
So, can of worms open.
Yeah.
So that's another hour-long Dhamma talk in the making.
Okay. And Carl says, oh, Bante, you must do a lot of mettas. I've never known you to be grumpy. Also, can you please wish good karma to a friend of mine who was just placed in hospice? She's one of the kindest people I know. Her name is Edith Thomas.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Carla, we will, let me write it down right now, actually. We will send her blessings.
Yeah, we'll do some blessing chants for her.
And Montclair's Buddha Path performed a cleansing ritual on the last Sangha of the year where they rang their singing bowl 108 times. For those who do not understand, what is the significance of 108?
I actually recommend looking it up online because there's several different explanations of the number 108. And different Buddhist traditions have their own reasons as to why that number is considered important. But it's in every Buddhist tradition. So Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana, all of them consider the number 108 to be particularly significant. It doesn't appear in the suttas anywhere that I'm aware of. But there is, it's in every Buddhist tradition. But there's several different prevailing explanations as to why. So I recommend looking online. I've never given it that much thought, but there's others who have explored this topic in great depth.
And Pablo says, is there such a thing as collective karma? COVID has made me wonder if the past 2 years has been a collective effect of negative causes, treating the earth poorly, causing suffering to animals, etc. Good to see you, first of all, Pablo. A long time no see. Hopefully we'll get to see you in person as well. Hope you're well and happy. So my understanding is that no, there's no such thing as collective karma. At least the Buddha doesn't talk about it in that way in the suttas that I'm aware of. So all our karma is our own. We reap the consequences of our own actions. But obviously, you know, there is, this is my interpretation, the appearance of collective karma. And that's, you know, in Italian, we have this great way of saying chi si somiglia si piglia. So who looks alike kind of comes together. So, yeah, I mean, obviously there are certain shapes of greed, hatred, and delusion that, you know, we all contribute to the world. We all are, you know, they're kind of like trends, sort of like in fashion. It's true. They're sociological trends. So once again, in Tibetan Buddhism, actually, they explain all of these things really well into detail. So past actions of the past, obviously they're the past actions that we've done, create also certain conditions that we are experiencing in the world. And that also entails, what is the state of the climate, you know? What does, how have we related to animals and so forth? Like there are so many different factors that then create this sense of collective karma. I don't know how to do long story short. I'm trying to do long story short, but maybe you can.
No, that was the completion of the story. So
okay, if you have any follow up, feel free to ask. And Sud says, dear Venerable, what about bad karma by association? If one doesn't drink, but while out with friends wants to be generous and pays for food for them, which includes drinks, would this incur bad karma? Since this means you basically allowed for someone else's unwholesomeness.
Wow, that is
interesting.
Yeah. So I would actually say that ultimately it comes down to your intention. So realistically, if you have the kind of friends who are going to drink alcohol anyway, and your intention is that as an act of kindness, you're paying for their meal. But actually, that would be really interesting if you're like, I'll pay for their tab, but not the drinks.
Actually, she says, they say, I don't know. But if you say, I'll pay for your food, but not for your drink, can make them uncomfortable if you're criticizing them.
Actually, honestly, I would think that if you're on good terms with your friends and they understand that you're a sincere Buddhist, that it might actually be quite proper to say such things. Because that might also be an opportunity to say something like, according to the Buddha's teachings, I shouldn't be buying alcohol, whether for myself or for others. So you can say, I'm perfectly happy to pay for your food, but because of my Buddhist practice, I can't pay for the alcohol. I think it's actually perfectly fine to say these things. So, uh, and if you have good friends, they won't mind. They'll understand. They'll be like, yes, I'm happy to support you in that. And if they don't understand and they're not willing to support you in that, then apparently they're not particularly good friends. And that tells you something about that relationship. Yeah, I actually think it. So I mean, then in the first case, I think it's a relatively light shade of gray. So it's not purely good karma. There's a slight unwholesome tinge there, but it's a relatively light shade of gray karma. But if you want to be totally pure karma, then yeah, you would pay for the food, but not the drinks. And if your friends are actually good friends, then they won't mind. Those are my thoughts. Do you have anything?
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, but highlighting that first and foremost, it's the intention. So, yeah, if you pay for it and then you realize that they have uh, had an alcoholic drink, don't feel bad about it. Just remember that your intention was not to purchase alcohol, but to, yeah, make a nice gesture of offering them food. And Laura asks, I came late, so I might have missed it. Will you still be doing these talks online while the monastery is closed? So for the month of January, all of the live streams are as they will be regular. And then in the month of February, there will be some that will be live streamed and some that will be recorded from the past. So we'll have, for example, Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi retreat, blast from the past that you haven't seen. So that will be there. And Venerable Tikva Pai retreat, that was also quite awesome. Anyway, we have some great things from previous retreats that will be posted, as well as some other venerables from different parts of the world joining in. So Venerable Palanyani will keep on giving her live streams of Venerable
Sanat Vihari.
Yeah, and Venerable Vimalanyani as well. So there will be still live streams. I won't be there, and Bhakti Sudasa will be there for the month of February, but there will be others.
So long story short, we'll keep having the regular times. Some will be live and some will be pre-recorded.
Yeah. But yeah, keep tuning in.
Yeah.
And then March will let you know what happens.
Go
yes,
ahead.
Tinuri?
So I have a question in regards to reincarnation. So I know sometimes it can be questioned. So what do you have to say about that?
Well, first off, in Buddhism, we normally prefer to use the word rebirth rather than reincarnation. And there's a subtle difference here. The difference is that reincarnation literally means returning back into the meat. So karna meaning meat. So reincarna. So returning into the meat. And it's based upon the belief that there's an immortal soul that periodically returns into physical bodies. So the term reincarnation is quite applicable in a Hindu context, but it's not quite correct in a Buddhist context. So instead, we prefer to use words like rebirth or continued existence or re-becoming, or continuation. So words like that, which imply what we actually have in Buddhism, which is a series of links in a chain of cause and effect. But there's not a persistent being which is unchanging and constantly returning to different bodies. So it's a subtle difference in terminology, but it is important. So we say rebirth instead of reincarnation. Briefly speaking, it's a natural consequence of the law of cause and effect. If you deeply reflect on causality, then you inevitably come to the conclusion of rebirth. So And I could go into more detail on the subject, but then again, that leads into a long Dhamma talk. Yeah. Do you have a specific question, or was it just a general question?
It was just a general question.
I have more specific. How about in the Tibetan Buddhism, where they have it seems to be reincarnation? Do you know where they get that, or what the justification for that is? Seems to be a little bit beyond rebirth. In like the Dalai Lama coming back, they find the next Dalai Lama in a child, that kind of thing.
So my understanding is that that's still the same concept of rebirth, but it's that the idea there is that somebody is directing their rebirth in a particular way, which we find referred to even in the Pali Sutta. So it's not a Tibetan Buddhist concept. So like the idea with the Dalai Lama is that in theory, this is a person who has chosen to be reborn as a human repeatedly. And actually the current Dalai Lama says it's always in sets of 7. So I found this interesting. They call him the 14th, but he actually says he's the 7th. And the previous 7 were a different being. So minor point there. But he says that, again, that they've made a resolution to be continuously reborn as a human being in order to help people in this world. So from a mind of compassion, they're directing their rebirth in a particular way. But the end goal is still to eventually attain complete awakening. And attaining complete awakening, one relinquishes all self-identity. So it still winds up in the same place.
Are there accounts of this in Theravada and other traditions of Buddhism similar to that system that exists in Tibetan Buddhism?
So Tibetan Buddhism, it's the most detailed, but the concept of intentionally directed rebirth, again, it's present all the way from the Pali Suttas. It's nothing new that was invented later. It's been there pretty much since the beginning.
I guess the main difference is the emphasis that in Theravada we have on arhatship.
Mm-hmm.
And in Mahayana, they have instead an emphasis on the Sammasambuddha path rather than the Anubuddha path as we have it. So Anubuddha being someone who follows the teachings of the Buddha and becomes a Buddha Arhat. And in Mahayana and Vajrayana, they have the emphasis on becoming a Sammasambuddha, so someone who comes into being when there is no teachings of the Buddha present, and rediscovers the Dhamma and shares it with innumerable sentient beings. So in order to follow that path intentionally, there's lots of different paramis that one needs to develop. And so you intentionally direct your rebirth in that way. But to get back also to Tineri's question, I would just say that I think we are just and it's the product of our delusion to be so obsessed with an arbitrary birth and an arbitrary moment of death. Mm-hmm. Because also Western science, once again, tells us that the body that we had when we were born, for example, or even when we were 4 years old, or I don't remember how far back, has practically dead. It's not there anymore. So we have already been reborn. A lot of times within this conventional life, physically wise, because that's all we're talking about. We're not talking about the mind. When people are skeptical about rebirth, they're not talking about the mind. They're just talking about the body, because that's the only thing that people see. That we have a birth certificate and a death certificate of this body. But in reality, there should be more death certificates and more birth certificates. It's just that apparently it looks like the same person and we can trace it. So once again, it's those things that only Buddhism gives the answers scientifically, right? Why do we still think that is the same body that we were today? Western science can't really tell you why. Maybe some neurons, and even though it's dead, but there's some keeps the neurons that transmit. But Buddhism does. Nothing is random. Nothing is erratic. Everything has a reason. And so, yeah, it makes complete sense. Yeah, without discoverable beginning, that we've cultivated all these things, and we keep on being born and dying, being born and dying. Otherwise, you have like births without deaths and deaths without births. Like it doesn't make any sense that everything is, we have cause and consequence, cause and consequence, cause and consequence, cause and consequence, but then there is no consequence to a cause. Like how is it that that it stops at a certain point? It just makes no sense. But Buddhism gives you all the answers.
So you would both say that the Tibetan system of reincarnation is a normative, like a kind of pretty standard view of how rebirth works?
Honestly, it's dangerous for me to say anything in depth about Tibetan Buddhism because I haven't studied it anywhere near as much as I have other forms of Buddhism. So if something's in the Theravada domain, I can speak with a lot of confidence. If it's something in East Asian Mahayana, I can say a few things, especially in the domain of Chan, and to a lesser extent, Huayan and Pure Land, I can say a few things. But when you get into Tibetan Buddhism, I actually can't say very much because I haven't studied it very much. So for those sorts of questions, you're better off talking to a Tibetan Buddhist teacher, and I can recommend a few if you're interested.
Thank
you. Yeah.
And John says, Bhaktisiddhasa, so thank you so much for the 2 recent lessons on the Anapanasati Sutta. It was very beneficial. I'm starting to read the suttas for the first time.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
Regularly watching Dhamma talks and building a regular meditation practice. So, sadhu. What guidance do the Venerable have for someone early in the Dhamma path? Is there anything else to include or incorporate? Since you seem to have a good influence on John.
Yeah, just keep going. So there's a lot to learn and there's a lot to practice, so just keep going. It can all seem quite overwhelming in the beginning, but don't worry about it. Just keep taking one step after another. So the most important thing, learn the Noble Eightfold Path and follow the Noble Eightfold Path. And the continuous deepening and unfolding of the Eightfold Path is Buddhism. Just make sure you're not leaving anything out. The Eightfold Path is complete. Make sure you're not leaving anything out. So that's my only real recommendation. Otherwise, just keep doing what you're doing. Read the suttas, meditate, follow the precepts. That's really all there is to it.
Great. And we have one last question. Perfect, because there's only 10 minutes left. Spike Girl says, I have had friends die suddenly from overdoses recently. Oh, I'm so very sorry to hear that. This has me thinking of my own funeral. Do you have any advice on how to make your death wishes known? Do either of you have plans in place? I personally do not have any plans for my death, except for attaining enlightenment before or at least stream entry. So that's my plan. Actually, that's what I was contemplating in terms of the decrepitude of the body. Actually, it was to create the sense of urgency. Also realizing how difficult it is to meditate with when your ankle is broken. So the body actually has this usefulness. So I would say that I would recommend that thinking about your own funeral is useful. So the practice of recollecting death is useful to recollect that we're living now, that we have the opportunity right now to live with the Dhamma and practice the Dhamma. And to recollect how, for countless immemorable lifetimes, your friends have died. And you yourself have died. And everyone you loved has been separated from you. Buddha says that the amounts of tears that we have cried are like larger than the oceans, all the water in the oceans. So it gives you that perspective that this is actually an incredibly precious human rebirth that we have right now, that we have access to the teachings. And some of us who were not born Buddhist, for us, it's like a more recent sort of acquisition. And it's actually great in a sense, because we can remember how miserable, at least I can, how miserable my life was before the Dhamma, and how much suffering, unnecessary suffering, I was creating for myself and others. And so how that was keeping me stuck in this cycle. So right now I have the teachings. Right now I'm making so much progress. I know you met me, I'm not impressive, but I used to be much worse in the past. Bhante met me prior to the Dhamma. So it's remarkable just the amount of progress that I've been able to do in such a short amount of time. So yeah, that's why we focus on the fact that we have a short amount of time left here with the precarious body, and we have the Dhamma. So how to make your death wishes known? I don't know. Is that really important? I would prefer to how to make your life wishes known. So declare to everyone, I am dedicated to this path. I am dedicated to the Dhamma, and practice the teachings of the Dhamma. So that would be my suggestion. Bhante, do you have any?
Yeah, I mean, similarly, I don't have any death plans because I actually don't care at all what happens with this body. This body it's not me, it's not mine. It's just a chunk of meat, and at some point, this meat's going to decay, and so who cares? So I don't care what happens to it. So whatever people want to do with this body, I don't mind. You can throw it over a cliff somewhere, or bury it in a box or whatever. I actually don't mind.
Everybody's cracking up at the idea of Bhante dying in these possible ways here at the monastery.
So after I'm dead, you can throw my body over a cliff if you want to. Just to be clear on that, not before. It's just a body. Why do we care so much about this chunk of meat? It's not important. And I also don't care what you do with my possessions. I mean, I don't really have anything anyway. I just have a few robes and a bowl. Don't really have anything valuable, so don't need to worry about writing a will because there would be nothing in it.
You have a computer, but that will go to Empty Cloud Monastery.
Plus, the value of computers declines extremely quickly. Right now, it's worth however much, but in a few years, it won't be worth its own weight.
Which is why we'll just go to Empty Cloud Monastery, the only recipient, if Empty Cloud will still be here.
No, I was actually told, like, after a certain number of years, computers actually have a negative value.
Oh, you have to pay to.
Well, because it costs resources to discard of it. So it gets to a point where it's not only useless, it's actually negative value.
Interesting.
Anyway, so long story short, no, I don't have death plans because it's completely pointless to have death plans. I am not this body, so who cares what happens to the body when it dies?
And Steve has the question on the breath. You can watch the Anapanasati Sutta that Bhante Sudaso just gave on Thursday morning and Friday morning, and the history. It's just because we're just right out of time and we have 2 questions that popped up. And Dan says, what do you do if you're always thinking about Dhamma? Best to go to ordain? Yes. Is there a good argument to developing certain paramis in lay life before doing this, as one may otherwise find it hard? Yes, go to a monastery and serve. I did that for quite some years before putting robes on, and it was great. Highly recommend it. And I'm happy to hear from all our friends that they're finding the teachings useful. Sadhu. All right, so we can end then with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be well and happy, and may all good things come to you.